buying a business is one of the most expensive mistakes you will ever make. Welcome to Entrepreneurship Through Franchising, a show about kicking down your cubicle wall with ETF and getting honest insights from the experts who guide new franchise owners. Hey, I'm Ty McBride, and on today's show, I'm joined by Brett Ethridge, lifelong entrepreneur, franchise broker who is passionate about helping dads find freedom through business ownership. Brett, man, I am super excited to have you here today. You and I met at a conference. You are a franchise consultant, franchise broker. And the question I always have as I get started on one of these things is franchising is such an interesting world. And how in God's name does anybody actually end up doing this? And so, Brett, give us a little bit of your background, how you end up today being a franchise consultant and broker.
It's a good question, Ty. It's good to be here. Very nice to meet you and get to know you better as well. Yeah, it's an interesting journey, right? It's really a question that a lot of people have when I'm talking to other franchise owners as well. Like, how did you get into franchising? How did you end up being the owner of XYZ franchise out in the space? Because we all have really diverse backgrounds. I mean, franchise owners come to franchising from the corporate world, from Wall Street, from the military. I mean, I've had people who painted cars for a living and now they're doing senior care. So it's like, how did you get where you ended up being? I've always had an interest in business ownership though. So I've been an entrepreneur pretty much my whole life. I had one real job, so to speak, out of college. I went into the Peace Corps, came back from the Peace Corps, and took a job working for a startup PR and marketing firm in Washington, D.C., and sat behind a desk for 2 years, grinding, 40, 50, 60 hours a week. And it was fun. It was actually exciting. It's not like I'm not bad-mouthing corporate at all. I had a great boss. It was a fun environment. It was very much a startup type of a culture. So I liked having the ability to sort of feel like I was influencing the direction of the company. So even then in the corporate world, it was very much an ownership mindset that I had sort of taken on in that business. And at that point, I realized, it's not what I want to do for the rest of my life. Started my first business, got married, and I've been an entrepreneur ever since. And it's always been self-directed. So I've built my own businesses, but I just believe so much in what business ownership can do for people and families specifically, right? So my business is franchises for fathers. I like to really work with families and fathers specifically and empower them to be in the home, to be present in the lives of their kids. And it's really hard, I have found, for people to do. If you're just grinding in the corporate world, you're a slave to your boss, you have limited control over your time and your income. It's not to say that you can't be a good father in that environment. I know plenty, but it is to say that certainly in my own experience, I have been fully present in the lives of my kids as an entrepreneur, as a business owner. I'm the one picking them up at 3:00 in the afternoon. We homeschooled our kids for a while. I was surrounded by all the other homeschool moms because usually it's the dad at work and the moms are the homeschoolers. And I was the one homeschooling my kids, and going to the events because I had the freedom to do it because of the types of businesses that I had built. And then recently I just had this decision point of, I really want to empower others to be able to experience what I've experienced. And I can do that, I think, really well through helping to match people, to pair people with the right business, because a lot of people love the vision I just painted. I would love to be in business for myself. How do I do it? Well, maybe you bootstrap it, maybe you figure it out, maybe you build your own thing, and that's absolutely right for certain people. But what if there were already existing brands that you could tap into, business in a box, so to speak? That's what franchising is to a certain extent. And so I love being able to help be that matchmaker to set people up for success in business. And I just think franchising is a great way to do that.
Man, that's so good. And here's what I love about that. Because it's a lot like my journey. And how I got to franchising, because for me, it was the same thing. Like, I had just this experience of, not that I didn't work hard, I worked really hard, but I also at the same time, being a small business owner, had a lot of flexibility in my life, which allowed me to just cut loose in the middle of the day and to be a part of, I have 6 kids, right? And so I could just take a break and I could go handle what my family needed me to handle or be present, and then I could go back to work, and I could work on the fly, I could work on vacation, I could go see family with my kids in Mississippi, and I could do all of that. And that was all built out of the fact that I owned a small business where I was in control of my day-to-day.
That's right.
And when I thought about growing my business, I thought, man, we've got something really unique and special here. I want to grow it. And I thought about growing it through managers and thinking, like, I'm going to have a bunch of people in jobs that I never wanted to be in, that I've actually spent my whole life like trying to get out of. And that just kind of felt kind of icky to me. And I thought, man, would it be so much better if I grew my business with other business owners?
Yeah.
And there was that point where I was like, well, exactly how does that work? And some Google searching, I realized, well, that's what franchising is. Building your business with others,
And what I
and
like
owning
about
at a
that,
local level.
well, that's what you just said is key, right? It's the local level. What really I think I have resonated with in the franchising world, which I didn't honestly know a lot about, is I mentioned I was in the Peace Corps, right? Part of the Peace Corps model is that if you can go
Yeah,
live in the community where you are doing the work and get to know the people and get to know their values and get to know the way they operate in life, you can meet their needs a lot better. And so the way Preservan, for example, might succeed in Boise, Idaho is probably different than the way it's going to succeed in New York City versus Birmingham, Alabama. And so if you can establish somebody who already has
right.
connections in the community, who lives there, who knows the people, man, what a great way to expand the reach of a brand in your case and really just thrive in business, because really all business is local. And so that's really what franchise ownership
Yeah.
is building business at that local level. And you can scale it, you can grow, you can even have multiple territories to be sure, but it starts there. And I love that. I resonate with that for sure.
Yeah, man, that's good. And it is, I have said for a long time, like, if you want to grow something, you've got to love where you live. That is, and it doesn't mean you have to have lived there your whole life. It just means you have to be all in on where you're at. If you love where you live, the people are going to get it, specifically in home services. But I think in anything, and that's going to be transformative. And you can't do that with not really with management. You can do that through local ownership. Uh, so, man, as a consultant, as a broker, this is a thing that I don't think many people realize is out there, right? Like,
That's right.
because if I'm wanting to buy a house, I know I get a real estate agent. That's obvious, right? You get a real estate agent, they help you find a house. But a lot of folks out there, they're listening to some podcasts or something talking about buy a boring business,
Yeah.
right? And so they might be burning up the phones trying to find that, I don't know, that diamond in the rough where you've got like a business that's not completely fallen apart, but it's got an owner that's ready to step away and you can buy it for a reasonable amount of money. Tell me a little bit just about how you see the role of a broker, and kind of how you kind of attack this when you're getting engaged with people who are, just interested in becoming business owners and they're not exactly sure what path they should go down.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I follow the buy a bit boring business people on Instagram, right? So I know who you're
Yeah.
talking about. And it's such an appealing idea. I had a guy reach out to me through LinkedIn, actually, saying, I'm looking to acquire an existing business. And so I went to work and looked for some options for him. There's some franchise resales, and you can buy the
Hmm.
business down the street potentially. And so a broker can help you see what's available out there to be sure. But in conversation with him, it sort of turns out he's just wanting to buy income. He has been sold this idea that if you find the right existing business with this beautiful family that's built this wonderful business for 50 years, and the only reason they're letting it go is because they just are too old and they're about to ride off into the sunset, and they would like to bequeath their business to the perfect buyer who can take it and continue to earn $250,000 a year without really having to do any work. Like, that's the ideal.
Okay.
And that's what he was looking for. And the reality is, there aren't as many of those as there might seem. And in fact, I don't know if the listeners are familiar with the website called Biz Buy Sell. There are lots of
Hmm.
clearinghouses of businesses for sale, franchise businesses, for example. And you go and you look at all of these businesses for sale. But if you look at the analytics, not a lot of them are selling. In fact, I dug into some of the numbers. Fewer than 20% of the businesses that are up there over the span of about a year even sell. And why is that? It's because when you actually start to dig into existing businesses, there are usually issues. There are usually reasons why businesses are up for sale. And it's not always just because somebody's retiring and riding off into the sunset. Those exist, they happen. But sort of the analogy I like to use is if you're buying an existing business, the airplane, the airplane has already taken it off, it's already mid-flight, and you're simply going in and buying the business, the airplane that's already cruising at 30,000 feet. The thing with
Hmm.
that, though, is I who's the pilot? Who's the co-pilot? Do you like the stewardesses? Like, what's going on behind the scenes? Do you like the culture of that business? And a lot of times you realize that you don't have a lot of control over that airplane that's already mid-flight, and how much more potential does it have? Can you take it from 30,000 to 35,000 or 40,000 feet? I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no. The thing that I always try to impress upon people is if you're starting the business, buying a franchise from scratch, for example, you just have a lot more control. Is it more work for you to do the work of getting it off the runway and getting it to cruising altitude? Yes. But when you do it, you're hiring the co-pilot, you're hiring the stewardesses, you're
Hmm.
creating the culture of the business and directing where it's going. And so it's just two very, very different dynamics. Um, all of that to say, it's not that there's a right or a wrong. I just think, to piggyback on what you said, though, the ideal of what you're getting when you're buying an existing business doesn't always match the reality when you dig behind and look at the numbers. Back to your question, though, why work with a broker? What people who don't even know that this role exists? It's that it's an outside set of eyes that might be able to help you think beyond what you are aware of. You're entering an industry that you
Right.
might not have a lot of experience in, and you simply don't know. And I think there are two forks there. There are two potential paths. I've had somebody, in fact, somewhat recently, I had a call with a guy who's exploring business ownership. And he painted this picture of what he wants his life to be. And then he ended up sort of his soliloquy as follows. He said, "But the truth is, I actually don't really know what kind of business I want. I know I want a business. Here's the life I want. I hate my job. Here's what I
Hmm.
want for my family. But I just don't really know what's out there. Can you help me?" And so then I went to work and we asked lots of questions and talked about different industries, and we're on the path to bringing him things. And I was able to bring him some things that he had just never even thought about or didn't even know existed. So there are some people who fall into that camp. There are other people who are sure they know what they want, but it's not actually what they want, or it's not where they would thrive. And so
Yeah.
my role as a broker is to help them consider things that they may never have considered before. So they come to me, to use another analogy, potentially a bad analogy, but it makes sense to me. You walk onto the car lot and you say, "I want a Corvette convertible." Because I've
Hmm.
always wanted a Corvette convertible, and I grew up wanting a Corvette convertible, and I like to drive fast, and so gosh darn it, I'm in the market for a car. Show me all the Corvette convertibles you have, different models, different years, different color schemes, different ways that the roof retracts and so forth. But then in conversation, they start asking me questions. They're like, "How many kids do you have?" I got 4 kids. How are you gonna fit your 4 kids in this Corvette convertible? Like, how often do you drive? What so they
Yeah.
start to ask, what are you using your vehicle for?" And all of a sudden you realize I might want the Corvette convertible, but it makes absolutely no practical sense for me and my family. Here's actually what I need. Here's where I would thrive.
Yeah.
Here's what matches me and my family best. And I think ultimately that's the role of a broker, is to help somebody think beyond their current thinking, be exposed to some ideas or industries or brands that they might not even know exist. Because at the end of the day, a lot of people come to franchising thinking McDonald's and Chick-fil-A and don't even realize there are
Right.
industries where franchising happens that they don't even know. So it's helping them broaden that. And then it's partnering with them, realizing you got to think about funding your franchise and legal and just navigating the whole due diligence process. I think having a partner with you on that journey makes all the sense in the world as well. And it's not just what I think. I mean, my candidates are always very grateful for having somebody to help them navigate what can be a fairly complex environment and process for a fairly major life decision that you're making. Why not have somebody other than AI chat GPT helping you with that process?
Man, no, and that's so true, and that's one of the reasons as the brand that I operate, we really believe in the relationship between the franchisor and the consultants and brokers, primarily because it helps us get connected with candidates that are serious, and also ones that have really thoroughly vetted their thought process. I mean,
Yes.
I've had calls with hundreds of people who might have just kind of come through a web form or something like that, and some of those people have made it through and they're great franchisees, but many of them are so early in the stage of just considering business ownership to begin with that they don't even know what they know yet. And so
Right.
there might be some interest in what we offer, but is our business available in their state? Are they ready for business ownership? All of these questions kind of come up. So I guess let's just think, if you get connected with me on LinkedIn, you find out that Ty is interested in becoming an entrepreneur, wants to leave his corporate gig. What are some of the first questions that you would ask me to to see, one, if I'm ready for becoming a business owner, and then two, to kind of help you identify what kinds of businesses I might would be interested in owning?
Yeah. Why do you want to be a business owner? So, I mean, I think that's first and foremost. I spend a lot of
Your
time
why. That's
asking the
it.
why question in various ways because, I've always wanted to own my own business. Um, isn't usually good enough. It's not motivating enough. It, you're about to make a decision. I mean, here's what I've realized, and here's the reality of the situation, especially if you've never been a business owner and you're coming out of the quote unquote safe corporate world where you have a paycheck every 15th and 31st. Switching to
Hmm.
an environment where you're driving the ship, you're building the business. There's a lot of great things that come with that, but there's a lot of hard that comes with that as well. And what I've
Yeah.
certainly known is that, and this is just coming from me as a business owner, right? I've eaten what I've killed, so to speak, for 30 years, 20 plus years, certainly
Right.
25 years. And there's been a lot of hard
Yeah.
during those times. The economy changes, recessions hit, COVID hits, and I'm still grinding as an entrepreneur. And so it requires the right mindset and how committed to this process are you? And it usually comes back to how powerful is your why. So I ask a lot of questions around that. What's really driving you? What don't you like about your current work environment that you think is going to be solved by being a business owner? How active can you be out of the gate? Are you planning to quit your job, or are you looking for something semi-passive or semi-active, for example? Um, so those are all questions, just getting a better sense of what they envision it looking like 5 years down the road, for example. So that's how I spend a lot of and then lots
Yeah.
of other questions, but I spend a ton of time there.
Because I think the why is going to drive what business opportunities, not the industry, because I can come to you and say, oh, I've always wanted to own a restaurant, or I've always been in construction, or I've been in marketing, or what have you. I've been, there's all these different places that someone can come out of in the corporate world, but the why is going to drive what type of business that you should operate, because it doesn't matter how much it may make sense financially if you're not driven to really serve people, or to really work with a large staff, then you probably, things like, and I'm just speaking here, I don't know for sure, but like things like home health care can be difficult because there's a lot of staff, and there's a lot of, you're serving people in their homes that have health issues, so you got to have really kind of, and you don't have to have a heart for healthcare. You have to have a heart. It's more about the people, and you got to be driven that way. And I think that just kind of understanding that why makes makes so much sense. There's also the practicality of business ownership, and you spoke a little bit about this because you spoke about, are you going to be a full-time operator? Are you going to be semi-active? Uh, for those that I think, unfortunately, there's too much language around this kind of, what do they call it? Passive income, right?
That's
Passive
right.
income, and then we call it like semi-passive, and God knows only what semi-passive means. That can mean, for me, and I'm guessing, Brett, for you, someone who's spent their life in being a small business owner, semi-passive to me means only working 40 hours a week. That's what semi-passive has meant many, many years in my life. But for others, semi-passive means like 5 hours.
Right.
And then, so kind of just speak to that, because I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding around that, and probably too many people, unfortunately, looking for something that is more passive than they probably should invest in.
It's an important question. I always tell my candidates, if you want something that's passive or even semi-passive, invest in the stock market. Like, you're buying a business.
That's right.
And let's take it to extremes. Let's say you're Jerry Jones, the owner of a professional sports franchise, or we often forget these sports teams that we're watching on TV, they're actually franchises, right? They're part of a larger umbrella organization. They have rules and regulations about how to operate within that system, but they're the owner. They're the owner of their own franchise, whether the Dallas Cowboys or the Washington Red,
Yeah.
formerly, I grew up a Washington Redskins fan or whatever, right? If you But they have other things going on, right? So a lot of times these owners also are running their own other businesses. Like Jerry Jones is still doing the oil business and something and so forth. But he has sunk a lot of money into the Dallas Cowboys. Do you think he's going to be
Mm-hmm.
involved? Do you think he's going to know what's going on a day-to-day basis? Do you think he's having regular meetings with his GM? Of course he is. Now, you could
Yeah.
argue Jerry Jones is over-involved, and I might be using an analogy that doesn't land with people if you don't know the sports world. But in the world of NFL owners, there are shades. There's the Jerry Jones who's over-involved. He spends a ton of time. He goes to every game. He's too involved in personnel decisions and things like that. He is running that business in a very involved but semi-passive way because he's got other things that he's also doing in his life. There are other owners that are very hands-off. They put a GM in place. They trust that GM. They'll have regular meetings because I've sunk billions of dollars into this organization. So I'm going to know what's going on, but I'm going to be a little bit less involved. But the point is, it's still your business. As I guess Teddy Roosevelt said, the buck stops here. Ultimately, it's your business.
Right.
You've been awarded the franchise. You've invested the dollars to invest in that franchise. If the GM wants to move on, you got to find a new one. If the employees aren't showing up, like if the work's not getting done, if the bottom line isn't what it is, it's still your business. And so I just really impress upon people that still has to be your mindset. It doesn't mean that you have to be the one driving the truck under somebody's house, doing the plumbing work. You don't have to be the technician in your own business necessarily, but you still have to be involved in your business. So I set that expectation and make sure that they understand that, there are ways potentially you can keep your W-2 job, but it's still your business.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes with your capacity to lead and manage others, right?
That's right.
Because can you? Sure, you can. And there are great examples out there. We've got some in our organization. But what the missing factor here is, one, you got to hire a GM, and usually that means you got to pay somebody. You got to really give them a really great compensation package.
That's right.
So you don't have turnover at the GM level, because turnover at your GM level, your top level manager level, is detrimental. You're gonna have it at some point, but you need to keep people as long as possible. So you gotta give them a great job, and then you have to manage them well, and you have to manage them by the numbers, and that's the part that I think that, to your point about the NFL owners, I'm not a huge sports ball fan, but I get it. Is those guys are managing it by the numbers. Like they know, they know their P&L, they know their balance sheet, they know how many butts are in the seat, and they know, what the concessions are doing. Like they
exactly
understand those numbers. They understand the drivers, and in the one that we have in our organization, they're meeting with their GM weekly where it's a drill down to the numbers because they understand that at that level you're really running your business by the numbers. And if
Yes.
you can't do that with the person you trust, then you definitely, and a lot of times you want to kind of, I always, when people have asked me this, like, can we put a manager in place? I'm like, well, do you know a manager you're ready to put in place?
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of the key. Like, do you already know somebody? Do you have somebody in mind right now because you currently work with them, or you have a past relationship with them, or you own another business and you're going to pull somebody from that business over to this one? Like, do you know somebody? Because I think if you don't already know, or at least have an idea of who you would make your manager,
Yeah.
it might not be a great fit.
That's right.
That's
But
always kind of my thought process on that
yeah.
semi-passive idea.
But I, and I don't want us to sound negative to the idea that you can't do it. I think on the flip side, though, and the conversation I do try to have, and this goes back to the why, is if somebody really envisions freedom and scale, because that's ultimately what they're asking you.
Yes,
Is this business, is it possible for me to take my family on vacation and know that the business
that's
is
right.
still running? Is that possible? And the answer to that question is yes, because ultimately you do, well, most of the people I'm talking to do want the business to grow beyond themselves. So that's why they're investing in
Right.
a business, not a job. That's why they don't want to take another job or take a chuck in a truck business where they're doing all of the work and
Mm-hmm.
really all they've done is buy themselves a job. And that's a very different mindset. And that's absolutely possible because eventually you want multiple Preservan trucks out there and you're managing the fleet. And if you take your family on vacation or you decide to play golf in the middle of the day on a Wednesday, your business doesn't grind to a halt. Is that possible? Yeah, that's absolutely possible. So you can definitely build a
Well,
business
and
that
that's what it's
has
all about.
scale. Yeah. That's a different animal. And will you have to have a
That's
GM and some people in place? Yes. But the mindset still has to be, but back to my airplane analogy, but let's still get this business off the ground. And it's going to involve some effort on your part as the owner out of the gate. Do you understand that? And that's a conversation I have with them.
Yeah, I love the airplane analogy because I can just imagine, like, I'm the pilot. It's my plane. We're gonna get in. We're gonna fly it, and I'm gonna get a co-pilot.
Yeah.
And there's some point in time where the co-pilot's gonna step in, fly the plane, and I'm gonna parachute out into the Bahamas or something,
That's exactly right.
and go on vacation.
Yeah. And
That's
there are plenty
right.
of those
Like that's
stories.
that's the plan. And
Yeah,
they
that's
can
right.
land it on the other end.
For sure. Yeah, that's right.
uh, so so you talk to them, you understand their why.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the next step in the process. Is so you understand their why. Obviously, there's questions that we've talked about their time investment they can make,
Yes.
and then with franchising or any business you're purchasing, you've got a financial investment, and that can be huge ranges from from 100,000 to a million and beyond, right? Like, so that's such a wide range that you'd speak to somebody. But let's talk about, like, once you kind of get those factors, you understand what their why is, you understand how much time they have to put into this business, and then you understand what their financial capacity is.
Yeah.
Uh, what's the next step? Like, how do you show them or introduce them, or what does that look like to find brands for them? I like I'm curious
Yeah.
how that works.
Yeah, and that's the role of a broker, right? Because I know things that they don't necessarily know, so I'm able to bring them some things that they may never have thought of. And you actually introduced the financial piece. I do absolutely need to figure that out. Like, what pond are we fishing in? Are we looking for more of a less expensive
That's right.
home-based option, or do you want brick and mortar? I mean, you might need a lot of money to open a brick and mortar gym or a spa or something like that. And some
Mhm.
people absolutely want that. Some people want more of a home-based home services types concept. So we do have to understand what you would qualify for financially. But but yeah, let's answer that question. And I would go back even a little bit beyond the why is I try to get a sense of their skill set as well. Because
Got you.
the skills that somebody has can translate to lots of different types of businesses potentially. So one of the questions I always ask people is, what do you like most about your current job? And oftentimes they'll say, my favorite part of my day is when I get to get out of the office and go interface directly with the clients. That
Mhm.
tells me something. You can do that in home services and senior care. And I mean, there's so many different potential businesses where your role in the business is going to be getting out in the community, building the relationships, marketing, selling, things like that. If that's what you like about your current job, great. But if somebody else says, man, I love, whatever it is, I need to know what they like about their current business. And then I say, that can translate. You don't have to stay in healthcare. Would you be open to? And then I throw out some other industries. If you could do the same thing that you love in this business and get out of the stuff you hate about healthcare and do it in home services, would that interest you? Yes, no, maybe. How about senior care? Yes, no, maybe. How about automotive? Yes, no, maybe. How about food services? Yes, no, maybe. And so it's trying to get a better sense of the skill set, the values. There's actually a tool that I use. It's called the Zoracle Business Assessment Tool. It's one of the tools that I
Okay.
use in addition to asking a bunch of questions. It's a short 10-minute, no right or wrong answer type of a survey that gives me a sense of their skills, values. Would they do better in an emerging brand, or do they need to go with a firmly well-established brand, for example? Where on that spectrum would they thrive? What about cultural fit?
Hmm.
And so I try to get a sense of all that. So I always send my candidates that tool. I'm happy to post it in the show notes if you think your listeners would be interested in
Yeah,
taking it.
yeah, absolutely.
And
That'd
it's
be
a
great.
free, no obligation tool. And so then I take all of that, my initial question, their financial kind of where on that range they land, what they've told me about what they like, don't like, skill set, et cetera. And then I just go to work, man. I just get into our inventory. We have an inventory of hundreds of different concepts that I have access to. Sometimes I'll branch beyond that. It's forming relationships with people like you, Ty, and understanding Preservan. Would Preservan be a good fit? And then I try to
Hmm.
bring them eight to 10 really good fit options. And then I present it to them and they say, I like that one. I don't like that one. This is interesting. Never thought about that. I'd like some more information on that. Nah, you missed the mark on this one. And then we just kind of see what they like and then begin the due diligence process with the different franchisors.
Yeah, so that's really great, and I just love, well, one, I love the idea that there's just so much options out there, right?
Yeah,
Like
there's a lot.
you're
Thousands.
looking at starting a business, right? There's thousands of options out there. You're looking at starting a business, and I kind of had talked earlier about the thing that I think makes business one of most successful is that you love the area that you're going to serve and that this fits within your why. And so knowing that you could like look at dozens of options that both connect with your why and connect with the area that you are, you feel driven to serve. That's really exciting, and that they do fit within so many, financial budget ranges. Things that you can get, you know, with a little bit of money down and an SBA loan, you can get into one of those kind of, lower size home service businesses. Or if you're more financially stable, you got other access to capital, you can get into those brick and mortar things. So much out there, and that's just incredibly exciting that the options.
Yeah, there are.
But uh, so you show me some brands, and let's say I pick one or two of them. Is that kind of the end of your role in it? You just kind of hand them off to the franchisor, and somebody starts to kind of sell their brand to them, or do you stay with them past that point?
I personally stay with them past that point for a couple of reasons.
Okay.
One, at that stage in the process, things get a little bit complex. There's a lot of variables that then go into play between that point and actually being awarded a franchise. And that's one of the things that I always impress upon my candidates is they might have full intentions of quote unquote buying a business or buying this particular franchise. You, Ty, are making decisions about whether you want to award this particular Preservan territory, for
Hmm.
example, to this particular candidate because they're representing you and your brand for the next 10 plus years
That's
or
right.
more. So it has to be a mutual fit. So I feel like I have an obligation to help coach my candidates and position them to have the best chance of being awarded a franchise. That's the first thing. The second thing is I've also realized not all franchisors are created equal in terms of how effective they are at actually doing their job of walking candidates through the award process. And so I have no doubt that Preservan has buttoned down systems. You never have anybody fall through the cracks. You're very good at figuring out their why and walking them perfectly through that. If I handed them off to you, Preservan, they'd get to the finish line with never hearing from me again. I have just realized that not all franchisors are that way. And so I just like to see where they are. I just need to make sure that they're being well served. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing is at some point in the process, they do need to figure out funding. And not all franchisors have in house funding partners. Not all address that with candidates. They sort of leave it to the candidate to figure out, how are you funding this franchise? I have partnerships there, right? So part of the job that I feel like I have is helping provide those solutions for my candidates, connecting them with vending partners. What about legal? Do they want somebody looking over the franchise agreement before they sign on to the dotted line? So I feel like I have an obligation to connect them with legal partners, for example, as well. All stuff that some franchisors do help them with, but I think having that third set of eyes, me as their consultant, who already has a trust relationship with them, I feel like I have an obligation to helping them get to the finish line to the extent possible.
Well, and just the value, somebody who spent a lifetime as a small business owner, just like you, and one of the things, if I have any success or any success I've had, has been because I have had somebody to bounce ideas off of, right?
Yeah.
At times it's been my wife, but also it's been my dad or my grandfather or somebody else that was kind of a specialist in the industry. I think of like Charles, my franchise attorney, like these kinds of people that I can pick up the phone. I can say, hey, I'm thinking about this. Tell me what I'm missing here. And that it sounds like is what they get with you, because if they hear something from a brand that just doesn't make sense, or they feel like there's a piece missing, or they have additional questions, or you can help them out through that. I also like this idea, and I guess speak a little bit more to this, because you said you coach them coach them on how to work with the franchisor.
Yes.
I think that that's really, really valuable, because from my seat where I sit most days of the week, as a small emerging brand, that has a responsibility to everybody else who's ever became a franchise here, that I have to protect the brand. Like, my number one job every single day is to protect the brand as the franchisor. And protecting the brand starts with me making sure that we bring the right people in.
Yes.
And it to us, yeah, that they're ready to invest the time, they're ready to invest the money. That's only step one. That's step
That's right.
one. That's like the qualification thing. I ask on the first call, and then we're in, are you the right fit for us? Because I'm here to protect the brand. How do you, I mean, give me some ideas on things that you would coach a candidate on, so that they can make sure, I mean, that they're connecting with the franchisor and they're communicating like, hey, I'm gonna be great for your brand.
Yeah. It, simple stuff that not everybody thinks about, because not everybody understands what business ownership means and what the relationship with the franchisor means and should look like. So for example, and let me make clear, I am not allowed to, like, ethically, legally, to try to influence them at all. At this point, I'm doing none of that. I'm
Right.
not weighing in really even on, here's what I'm thinking. Do you think Preservan would be a great brand? Oh yeah, you'd thrive there. Like, I'm not trying to talk. It's none of that. It's things like, when I pass them off to you, the very first step is to have an intro call with you. So at this point, I've passed them off, but I will have a conversation and send them an email saying, you're about to have your intro call with Ty at Preservan. Here are some tips for you. Show up on time. Dress professionally. Make sure your background is uncluttered. This is going to be a professional engagement, and it's your first interaction with a partner that might be somebody you have a relationship and a partnership with for the next 10 years. Treat it as such. And it's a small little thing, but what it does is it shifts their thinking. It shifts their mindset to, this isn't some haphazard, I can be driving on the phone with the kids screaming in the background when Ty gives me a call. Like, this is a serious engagement I'm entering into. I need to block out time. I need to carve it into my schedule. And those are just expectations, consulting, if you will, that I have. And I think it goes a long way. It's even saying things like, let's act with professional courtesy and respect. If you ever get to the point with Ty and Preservan where you no longer feel like it's going to be a good fit for you, let them know. Let's not ghost anybody. Let's return emails.
That's right.
let's honor a commitment. And if something comes up and you have to reschedule on your calendar, let's make sure to do that so that you're not wasting somebody's time. And so that's sort of what I mean when I say consulting. And then, I mean, we can go into it further. Hey, they're about to send you the FDD. Here are some tips about what to look for when you're reviewing the FDD. If you want to talk to a lawyer, let me know. I can put you in touch. Hey, you're about to do validation calls. Here are some good questions to ask when you're called. So that's what I mean by coaching and consulting. It's just helping them navigate this process, which can be lengthy, to get to that finish line.
Yeah, well, I think it's great advice to give your candidates, your clients, because from our perspective, those things matter. Those and you're right. It's not anything huge. It's not. And I would never want anybody to coach them on what to say,
Right.
but it's about coaching them on how serious this is, at least how serious it is from our perspective. And then, those little things, like, man, showing up on time and being like not driving while I'm talking to you on the first call, like that,
Right.
that for me says a lot. That says a lot because I'm committed my time. I want to make sure that we're going to have a good conversation. And no, those are really great just advices to give the candidates. Brett, as much as we could set here on this call and we could talk about the value of consultants, a lot of people still will just look at, there's 4,000, I think, franchises out there, and you can get on websites like Franchise Gator or whatever, or you could wander into a restaurant and you could just see, hey, we're franchising. You go, I'm going to look into that. Lots of people, I talk to them all the time, they're going to DIY this process. We wouldn't recommend it, but however, not all brands are created equal. Not all franchises are created equal. 4,000 franchises, they're not all created equal. So in the event that someone is just DIYing this thing and they're not going to call a guy like you, what are some of the red flags that could come up? You probably wouldn't introduce a brand that had these red flags, but what are some of the red flags that could come up in a conversation between a candidate and a franchisor that you would tell someone, like, proceed with caution?
Right. Yeah, it's a very good question. You can get that information a couple of different ways. So at some point in the process, you, the candidate, if you're watching this, are going to be issued their FDD, their franchise disclosure document. And it's a long, lengthy document. There are a lot of items in there. But one of the things that I always encourage my candidates to look at are the closure rates. Are more territories opening than closing? Like, is this brand growing or is it not? And it seems like a very simple thing, but that's a big red flag. If they have a lot of people trying to sell, get out contracts, you can find some of that information online, Biz by Sell. If you see a ton of resales up there for this and people are trying to get out of their contracts and dump the brand, I mean, that's a red flag. And some of those numbers are actually detailed in the FDD because you report how many new openings did you have, how many closures did you have, and what is that mix? And so that's something to look for. I think the validation calls are such a huge part of the process. And so if you're DIYing it and you're trying to figure out if this is a brand you want to go with on your own, call a lot of different types of current owners, not just the super successful ones, but even some of the not successful ones. And I always tell my candidates, just because somebody is not having wild success with a brand, it's not necessarily the brand's fault. So don't assume just because you're talking to a franchisee who's not having a great experience, you want to understand why. Are you not following their That's the number one, by the way, we're sort of going off on tangents. The number one reason people fail in franchising, meaning, and by the way, the numbers about success in a franchise business versus a traditional startup or buying an existing business, it's like, way more likely you're going to be successful in a franchise. Why? Because they have systems and processes in place that are proven to create success. And the number one reason people don't have success when they invest in a franchise is because they don't follow the systems. So when you're talking to the franchisee, try to get a sense of, is the problem on you or is the problem on the brand? And a lot of times it's on them, not the brand. But if you're getting a sense during the validation calls that they're not delivering on what they said, they promised me all this back end support that's just not really there. Their marketing is terrible. Like, if there are some issues, pay attention to those. Those could be some red flags as well. And then, sort of the final thing that I would say, this isn't necessarily a red flag with the the brand that they might be vetting as much as just philosophically is I really always try to encourage my candidates, and this is early on in the process when we're trying to figure out what industries or what type of business is, and maybe it's because I talk with a lot of fathers, families, is to take a long-term mindset, right? Don't necessarily gravitate towards hot trends in the moment that might not still be good businesses 5 or
Yeah,
10 years from now. Because that's the other red flag is if you're
that's
just
so
chasing
good.
a shiny object, the shiny object might help you cash in for the next 2 to 3 years, but what happens when the fitness trend is no longer sexy or the special cookie concept that everybody waits in line for today, but they no longer want to spend $5 on a cookie 5 years from now? Like, you want a business, at least talk to my candidates, you want a business that you can will to your kids someday, a legacy that you can pass down, a business that has scale and is going to be in demand in a world of AI, in a world of can it
Hmm.
survive recessions? Is AI going to take your business away from you 5 years from now? No, because a human being still has to change out somebody's hot water heater. Like, at the end of the day,
Right.
these are questions you need to be asking yourself. And the keyboard warrior trying to DIY it himself might not think about some of these things. And now you're going to think about these things because I just brought them to light. But just pay attention to those things as you're doing your own due diligence.
Yeah, you don't want to be another yogurt, buy into the next yogurt franchise. If you're anybody over the age of 30 remembers the yogurt places that were like
Yeah.
quite literally on every corner, they were
Yeah.
all franchises. And if you drive by that same corner today, I would bet everybody that's listening here that 90% of all those yogurt things are gone, if not more. And you want to watch out for that. You want to watch out for fads. I mean, I know that that's kind of self-serving of me because I operate in businesses that aren't fads. Fixing houses, whether that's hot water tanks or wood or whatever it is, that stuff's gonna be around for a long time because they get old. And also like home health care,
That's right.
great business
Yeah.
because
Right.
as human beings, we get old and things happen to us, and we need people to
People
take
are
care
going to
of us. And the
still turn
best place to take care of
65
them.
20 years from now. So, right, senior care is always going to be a
That's right,
thing.
and AI's not fixing that for now as
No,
much. At least in our lifetime, I don't think anybody's going to fix aging.
no.
So those are great. Those are great signs, and I also love the validation point.
Yeah.
And I always think of validation a lot like I've interviewed a lot of people for a job, right? And when you're interviewing, I always kind of you know I look for people who are optimist, and I think when you're doing validation, you should kind of consider that, and weigh that when somebody's having a really negative opinion. Like there are like really really legitimate negative opinions that are out there,
That's right.
uh, but I think you need to kind of get a sense of whether or not, like you said, is this a negative opinion because uh I'm just kind of a negative person, like you're just getting a sense of a negative
Yeah.
person, or is it because the franchise is not delivering? And then weight that. It's kind of like when you're reading reviews for something on Amazon, uh, and you read like all the 1 stars, and a bunch of the 1 stars are like, it was on a $20 knockoff product, and they're complaining, and you're like, well, you kind of went into this with low expectations. You kind of got what you paid for.
Well, and the other
Uh,
thing, the other thing I remind, so my first business that I started, I said after my first corporate job was a kind of a sales business, building teams and so forth. And I would have people come back to me after Googling our brand, like Googling our products. And they'd say, I found this negative thing, or I found somebody who blah, 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 blah. And what I would remind people then, and it's still true today, is the people who choose to go out of their way to say things online tend to be the negative ones. You know what I'm saying? Like, for people who life
yeah,
is great, the business is thriving, they're in a good spot, they're raising their families, they don't really have time to hop online anyway. So the bad is being highlighted, but it's only 10%. The other 90% are having this great experience. You're just not hearing about it because those types of people aren't spending their time going to vent their frustration on Google. And so you have to take all the random Google searches with grains of salt anyway, right? So this is where
Yeah.
talking to real human
They're too
beings.
busy working, or they're too busy living
working.
their
They're too
life
busy
to
building their
complain.
lives and building their business. That's exactly right. And
Yeah.
so go have real
Yeah.
conversations with real people and try to separate. Yeah, exactly what you already just said. So I don't know. It's a crazy
Yeah.
world we live in the
No,
digital
I mean,
space.
validation. What I would say about this is one of the things, and as someone who, I acquired a business, and that is part of my story, part of my journey. It's also one of my biggest failures. When we have franchisees here, I actually go through a list of all of my failures to let them know that they're going to fail and it's okay. And that's what a franchisor is here to help them out, is to help them navigate failure, because that is the passage, right, of business ownership is some level of failure. My only wish is that they just don't fail at the same things I failed at. That's why they
That's
become a franchisee. But when I think about that acquisition, it wasn't a franchise, and I had nobody to call. I had nobody to like validate with. One, I didn't have a business broker to bounce ideas off of, and I didn't have anybody to validate. I couldn't pick up the phone and say, "Hey, does this actually do what this guy is saying it does?" I had what he provided me, the numbers he provided me, the information he provided me, and that's one of the strongest, I think, value propositions for franchising, is that you can and should pick up the phone and call 2, 3, 4, or to your heart's content, until you feel confident that you're talking to the right company, the right brand, the right culture, because that's what you're going to get when you're talking to these folks. Is this a good culture? And I think, like, too, you'll get a sense of how well the franchisees work with other franchisees. Like,
Yes.
is this a culture that's going to build us up?
Yeah.
Or are we all a bunch of lone gunmen out here all on our own?
And you can
That's
feel it.
another thing that you'll find
Yeah.
as you're doing that. Yeah.
Trust your
Yeah.
intuition, because you can feel, and that's some of the value. I try to encourage people to vet several at once, because you're going to feel the difference between them. Yeah, I don't really resonate with this one. This one just I mean, and you don't want to go just by feelings. Obviously, you need to look at the numbers and know that the business is going to work, but you'll know when you found the right fit.
Yeah, man, that's so true. And that's the way we feel here too. Like, on our end, I know when I found the right fit. I can tell
Yeah.
within the first couple of calls, like, and there's other things that can come up that can make things not end up the way that we had hoped, or with them becoming a franchisee. But you can tell when someone's a culture fit, and you can tell when you're going to be a culture fit. And if you feel the culture fit vibe, go for it. It doesn't, like, money is only part of this scenario, right? It is. I tell people, like, business is hard enough. You want to wake up every day and be excited to do it.
Yeah.
And excited to do is like, you love what you do. It connects with your why. You're in the right culture. You like the franchisor. I tell people in our calls, I'm like, hey, you and I are going to talk a lot in the next 12 months. And, before you say yes to the next call, I want to just make sure, like, you're just not annoyed by the sound of my voice, because you're going to hear it a lot. Brett, this has been, man, I think that this is such a valuable insight into the world of franchise discovery, franchise selection. You've given us some really good kind of nuggets. If somebody is listening to this and they really, like, are really connecting with your vibe, maybe they're a dad out there, like, hey, I like this guy. I think he can help me navigate this process of becoming a business owner. What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, franchisesforfathers.com, all sorts of contact information on there. Reach out to me directly. Find me on LinkedIn, Brett Ethridge. So appreciate that opportunity. And if I could share, one more little bit of encouragement for people, or sort of a parting thought?
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you one more thing. I was going to say, what's your one thing? So maybe this will be it. What's your one thing that you would tell anybody considering becoming a business owner?
It's Well, first of all, do it. I mean, there's nothing better than building a good business that gives you freedom. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But my bit of encouragement would be this: there will be a point in this process, especially as you're getting towards the finish line, where it comes time to actually sign on the dotted line and spend a decent amount of money on a whatever, where You might feel a little nerves, you might get a little cold feet, and I've seen it and I've experienced it where people turn back. They go back
Yeah.
to a job. They go back to their previous life. And what I would encourage you, and it's the same thing I talk to my candidates about, is you need to keep your eyes fixed on what you want your life to look like 5 years from now. And it's a very simple question. If I don't take action now, will my life be substantially different 5 years from now? And
Yeah.
it's such a powerful question. And almost always the answer is no. If I just go find another job or stay in my current job, yeah, I'll get my 3% raise a year, I'll get my Christmas bonus, but will my life be any different or any better 5 years from now, 10 years from now, if I don't take this action of moving forward with the franchise I'm so excited about? I fit well with culturally. I loved it until I got to the point where I have to sign the check. Yeah, just do it though. Sign the check, do it, because 10 years from now, you want to be in a different place. And it all goes back to the why that I spend so much time working with my candidates to help them unearth, because that's the life you want and it is possible, but it's on you to take the action to make it happen.
Dude, that's so good, man. I love that. It really is about just pushing through and thinking about the life that you want, the life you want to leave. And as a father, the way that you want your children to see that legacy that you're building, and you can build
Yes.
that as a business owner. Brett, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to leave all of his stuff in the description and show notes, so get in touch with him. I'm going to put a link to the Zoracle there as well. You can take that, and Brett will probably schedule a call and go over it with you if that's something you want. Brett, thanks so
Yep.
much for your time, man. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Appreciate it. Enjoy the conversation.
Later. Thanks for listening to the show. Make sure you hit the follow button in your podcast app so you never miss an episode. And if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe before you go. You also can connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search Ty McBride. Later.